Hi, everybody. Today I'm here talking with David Ryan Polgar for PreparationTech. David is a digital ethicist. And if you were like me, you probably didn't know what the heck this was. This is a really new and evolving profession, which has basically come about because of all of the social media and the implications of that. But before I say anything else, I'm just going to hand it over to David to introduce himself and explain what he does.
Sure. What do I do? Yes, I'm David Ryan Polgar. I operate as a tech ethicist. I have a background as an attorney and educator. And one of the things that I noticed early on, since I've been involved in this field since about 2012, is that there was a major need for greater level of thoughtfulness around technology. Not only the application of it, but the implication. Because if we think about it, a technologist tends to see a problem and then creates a solution, right? Whereas there's also the need to look at those solutions that were created and find the problems from that, right? To interrogate the system, and that's really what I do, and I think it's much needed because if we think about emerging technology and the social media that all of us use and the smartphones that we carry around in our pockets, that impacts the way we live, love, learn, even die, right? It has major implications on the human condition, right? From us, from an individual level, from civil liberties, and then also on a broad societal level. It's impacting democracy at large. That's a big deal. And I want everybody to kind of stop and say, well, how can we ensure that the technology that we develop and deploy is beneficial for us on an individual level and also society at large? And I think that's why there's the need for a greater diversity of thought in the whole process. And that's really the role that I play as a tech ethicist. But one of the things that I have seen is that, yeah, early on in 2012, 2013, a lot of people kind of scratched their head and said, well, what's a tech ethicist? What's a digital ethicist? Whereas, frankly, after scandals like Cambridge Analytica and others, more people would reach out and say, we need more tech ethicists. And I think it's important to remember that all fields are new until they're not new, right? So even something like data scientist, that's a relatively new term. So I, spoken to a lot of people recently who were data scientists before that was even a known term, right? So what you find is that every technology causes a ripple effect where we say, how can we ensure that we get the most value out of it? And really what I do as a tech ethicist is I look at the legal, emotional, sociological implications of social media and technology. In particular, and I think there's a lot of different spaces here, but in particular, I tend to focus a lot around social media and its implications with something like content moderation. I recently just started on advisory role with a content moderation council for TikTok for their United States types of policies. So what you find from the other tech ethicists that I know is there's such a broad range of fields that you can get into. So for example, you have things like bots that more of us are interacting with bots, but those have major implications and a greater degree of why we should have different backgrounds thinking about them, right? So even if you think about the bot that you interact with, well, if you are communicating with it as if it's another human, well, how is it being developed? Who's the one who's programming that bot? A bot? Who is the one that is choosing that dialogue? What if you say something very serious to Siri? What if you say, Siri, this is a problem that I'm having at home. This is some act of violence against me. You really want to ensure that the programmers had the degree of forethought and thoughtfulness around how they're developing this. So the larger point is that technology is not technology anymore. It's society. When we're talking about technology, we're actually talking about equity, equality, power, right? These are bigger issues. There's not something that we want to leave solely to the purview of technologists. We want to obviously have technologists, but we also, right, we need the philosophers and the saints and the poets and the psychologists, professors. We need everybody on board, and that's really the field that I'm involved with. It's a multidisciplinary approach that's cross-sector.
Okay, great. And this brings up the question, what what's the process? How do you collaborate with people to actually bring a sense of ethics and investigating ethics into a company or a scandal or something like that? Take us through the process.
Sure. Well, the process is obviously different for every company, but the big part that people are looking at is what can we do to create greater thoughtfulness in the overall process. One of the things they want to make sure is that, and this is something that has received some media attention, they want to make sure that a company is not using kind of a hired ethicist as a way for just public relations, right? So you want to make sure that a company is not just hiring ethicists to say this one person is dealing with this issue. Really, you need to ensure that this degree of thinking and thoughtfulness and ethical consideration is baked in the entire process. So oftentimes what I'll do or other people in the field will work with a company to investigate the different parts of the process where this consideration could happen. And I'll just give a quick example of why this is important. Uh, Recently, it's about a year and a half ago, Google Duplex was or is a technology that's a kind of a bot that like an assistant you can have that can make phone calls on your behalf to have a haircut appointment or maybe make a reservation at a restaurant. And what I found interesting is here you have this obviously multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with Google, Alphabet, their parent company. But at the same time, they released this demo where the technologists in the field were fascinated with it, right? They were all in favor of having something that could confuse another person into thinking that it's a human, right? That's the Turing test, that's the imitation game, something that technologists have long been fascinated with. But the general public had a quick backlash. The backlash was so instantaneous and severe that Google had to backtrack and say, we made a little bit of mistake, we should have transparency. So my point there is that if they had baked in this kind of ethical consideration into the process, that's something that easily would have been prevented and come up, right? So the larger question is ensuring that you go through all these different kind of checks, if you will, in the process to say, okay, we understand its technological capability, but what is its societal implications? So for example, in that scenario, yes, it's an amazing technological achievement to create a bot that sounds human, that has the ums and the ahs that are typical of human speech. But then you flip it around and say, what about that from a level of respect, right? What about that from the worker's perspective? What if they don't know if they're talking to another human or a bot? How does that impact them, right? How does that affect them from a psychological level? These are larger questions. So that's why you don't want to just have an over indexing or over emphasis on just the tech side of it. You also want to make sure that you are thinking about it from a human rights perspective, from a civil liberties perspective, from a legal perspective. So basically, you're broadening the consideration that you would have around any type of technology that you are developing and deploying.
Right. I'm listening to you and I'm listening to your conviction, and you obviously believe a lot in people's right to transparency, to privacy, to these kinds of things. David, take us back to your childhood. Take us back and take us on a story of how you became the tech ethicist, starting with your childhood.
Yeah.
What were you interested in?
Yeah, I was always fascinated with inventions. I was always fascinated early on as a kid reading about Einstein, theory of relativity, and just kind of the mind-blowing aspects of changing the conception of time and space. Always fascinated with that. And even early on, with inventors like Nikola Tesla, who now is owed to Tesla cars. But one of the things that I always think about of how it's connected is also kind of early on in my childhood, in my formative years. that was the rise of the World Wide Web, really as a concept. And I can explicitly remember when this enthusiasm was building about what the web even really was. So it's not a phrase that's often used as much anymore, if at all. But in my childhood, they talked of it as the quote unquote information superhighway.
Remember?
The story that I gravitated towards, and I specifically could remember right now and feeling it's I guess optimism is that if the web can connect everybody, it doesn't matter if you are in Timbuktu or Kathmandu, that you could have all the world's information at your fingertips. This was incredibly exciting for me, right, as a kid, because you also thought about all the world's troubles and how if you connected the world, that kind of similar to how we're having a conversation, even though we are at different parts of the world, uh, that that's going to break down boundaries. That's going to break down these kind of differences that we think about with culture, right? We can have tools that alter even how we communicate, even when we don't speak the same language. This should make us this should make for a friendlier web, right, or a friendlier world, and kind of a connection that the web would influence the world. So I was really kind of steeped in that techno utopian type of future that everybody was seeing at that time in the 90s. And what I'll say is, I think that's why I have the feelings of conviction that I do, because uh, I don't toggle so much into being pessimistic as I do in being uh, convicted that we need to have more thinking and thoughtfulness around this, because you see the promise about what this can do, but you also see the peril about what happens when we don't really consider how things can go sideways. So really the lesson there is that unfortunately the emerging technology or social media, it's not a process where you can quote unquote set it and forget it. You can't create something and just throw it out there and then just everything's good,
Hope for the
because
best. Yeah.
right, because we as humans are we're not always good actors, right? We don't always do what is intended with, right? So it's the classic idea is that you can create a hammer and say use it to build a house, but you're also going to have somebody who is going to use that to harm somebody, right? So how do we ensure that more people are using the hammer correctly, and how do we design the hammer differently? That's really the important part. So yeah, I think my childhood really has had a major impact on what I think today, because I always want to reach that point of potential, the point of potential of what the web can really do and what the future can really be. I mean, even when I think of my childhood and consider what our futures of the what our vision of the future was, I was always very optimistic about it solving, dilemmas about how we were working. It was going to allow us to be more creative. It's going to allow more leisure time.
Mhm.
Even if you think about cartoons that I'd watch, like the Jetsons. The Jetsons, if you think about it, George Jetson worked about 4 hours a week pushing pushing a button. That is dramatically different than where I am sitting in the United States, how our future has turned out, where people are still overworked. So there's a big disconnect, right? Because the very idea, even if you think about what technology is even supposed to be, it's usually connected with trying to make our lives easier, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we have seen that is not always the case. So sometimes, like on one hand, for example, even right now, we can say, all right, we can give everybody internet connections. We can connect everybody. We can make mobile tools. This means that you don't have to be at the office as much. But the flip side is it also means that you're never not at work because you're
Gone.
always findable. You're always a Wi-Fi connection away. So there's deep aspects we need to think about, because again, this utopian vision that a technologist oftentimes has, that is not always going to be what it's naturally going to turn out as. But I
Right.
will say, to kind of fully connect with your question on my childhood, is I never want to lose that optimism, that you still want to have those crazy inventors, right? So you still want to allow that space. So I think that's why with my career, with what I do day to day, it's still about not fully restricting this creator and inventor. It's about saying, listen, we need more people at the table. I don't want to prevent you from coming up and imagining some wild future, because that's what we need. That's what creativity is. Creativity needs to be unbounded to a certain extent. You don't need to have all these limitations, right? Whereas what you need to do is you need to have that creativity go part of a larger process that then dissects it and say, here's this great idea of, let's say, self-driving cars, but wait a minute, what happens when it snows? What happens about jobs? How does this impact jobs, right? How does this, what happens if there's a car crash? What does this do to insurance?
Right.
How does this fit into a broader part of society? How much is this going to cost? Can people afford it, right? There's larger questions. So it's not just about inventing this self-driving car. It's about thinking how this builds a better society.
Right. And I'm going to come back to your childhood again. What were your hobbies? Like,
Yeah.
what did you do extracurricular activities?
Mhm.
What were your favorite subjects? I'm just trying to get a sense of.
Yes. Yeah. Well, early on, as a kid, I was a kind of like a math whiz. Early on, loved that. Like I said, big into kind of the sciences, and then I also remember, one of my fondest memories, even a little later in my childhood, is kind of building this, kind of physics contraption that would transfer energy, and just I guess I always gravitated towards uh, inventing something, right? And that's something that always would draw my interest. So for extracurricular activities, they were usually around, going to some to some aspect of creativity, and that's what I was always kind of blown away with. I loved stories like, Shel Silverstein, Where the Sidewalk Ends, because I think I just love people who are thinking kind of outside the box, or authors like Kurt Vonnegut, who I thought were more creative in their approach, but they usually kind of had like a humanist type of viewpoint, if you really kind of read between the lines. Same thing with Shel Silverstein. I go back and I read those poems right now. People think they're for kids. They're not for kids, right? They're for kids and adults, because his poems, they have very serious messages. So I think I always gravitated towards that type of creativity.
And then in school, when you were studying, say in
Yeah,
high school and then into university, were you the kind of kid that was looking at philosophy, at the humanities? What were your favorite subjects?
sure. You know, I as an undergrad, I focused on management, and then I got really involved with kind of the student senate as the student senate president. I got highly involved with events, but then also taking classes in like I said, in philosophy. Then I also started later on getting drawn into psychology. Frankly, if I could do it all over again, I'd probably get more involved in psychology. I've always been kind of an
Wow.
armchair psychologist, and subscribing to Psychology Today, things like that has always just been kind of an interest of mine. But what I will say, about that, one of the things that connects is seeing kind of the interplay. So, for example, in undergrad, in college, uh, with my time as a student senate president, I was dealing with, doing a lot of public speaking, which is, you know, dramatically kind of impacted my current trajectory, because I do a lot of speaking on TV and radio and public speaking, things like that.
Mhm.
But then also in that role, I was dealing with administration, with board of trustees. You started seeing all the different levers of power. This had a profound kind of impact right now, because so much of my focus and my work is on kind of this multidisciplinary, multi-pronged kind of approach how we need to think about technology, not just as the individual, or not just as the company, or not just as policymakers, but how there's an interplay between those three parties. And I think that was really influenced by my upbringing and what I did in college, and then after that, going to law school. I think I've always been somebody who didn't really see the need to stay in one box. So if there's something that has been kind of a stable aspect or connective tissue from my childhood, from high school, from college, law school, it's that I never saw myself in one box, right? And frankly, if I'm going to be honest, I think if we're looking at education 10, 20 years from now, it's going to be a lot more multi-transdisciplinary. Myself included, I'm one of the people who would advocate that maybe we need to move away from majors, which is a major part in universities in the United States, where you have kind of a chosen major that's heavily influencing the courses you take. But lately, you've seen a push to say, okay, well, if you're a computer science major, are you being exposed to ethics classes? There's a lot of discussion, especially at prominent universities like Stanford, that have dramatically influenced a lot of emerging technology, since so much of it is developed there. There's been a big push that we need to broaden the kind of curricula that people are exposed to. So the larger point, I think, is that you don't just necessarily need a philosophy class for a computer scientist. You need to make sure that we're exposed to every aspect. So, for example, day in and day out, my career, my life, it's a little bit of law, it's a little bit of psychology, it's a little bit of philosophy, ethics, right? And it's dealing with policy. Those are all aspects. It's dealing with entrepreneurship. I think it really behooves us to say the worker of the future is not really going to be in one box. The more we can be kind of exposed to everything. And also, I do want to point out that I think we are probably trending away from thinking of education as ever ending. My education's not ending. I'm getting educated every day. I feel like I'm constantly in a new master's degree program because there's so many incredible videos to watch. There's so many people you can talk to. There's online classes you can take. So I think that the future is really going to be about I don't know, the perpetual education. I feel like I'm perpetually being challenged. There's so much that I am learning, but at the same time, the more you learn, as you find, right, the more you realize you need to know more, right? So you're constantly being exposed to saying, all right, how do I understand this? But what I will say to kind of connect, that is all based on having kind of insatiable curiosity. So if there's one part, and this goes to my childhood, you have to be curious, and you also have to be able to experiment. So one thing I was thinking about with my childhood that probably did have a profound impact on where I am today is I remember cooking and baking a lot, and my mom would always kind of say, like, come up with something, right? And there was no restrictions on the ingredients that you could use, and it didn't have to follow a recipe. And I think that's actually important, because if you are restricted too much, then you're thinking that something has to exist. You're thinking that you have to follow the recipe in life. Well, guess what? I didn't follow a recipe with my career trajectory. I made a new recipe. And that's the important part, is that we're always coming up with new recipes, because a dish doesn't exist until it exists, right? It doesn't exist until somebody makes it and then says, this is what we need. This is what tastes good, right? So I think that is actually really important, So my childhood was constantly experimenting, was constantly. I remember how many days I would just spend tirelessly, kind of like trying to invent something to say, I've got these items, right, in a box, and what can I make from it?
Mm-hmm.
Or saying, I've got these ingredients in the kitchen, and have my mom just say, like, go for it. Come up with something, invent something. Maybe it tastes good, maybe you'll throw it out. But again, not every kid is raised that way, right? A lot of kids are seen as, no, here's the recipe, here's the ingredients you need for the recipe. I'm going to say that I think I was dramatically influenced by the fact that there were no boundaries in terms of creativity, and there was frankly an emphasis on trying to come up with something new. Because uh, if I think about my own career in 2012, when I had to go out and say there's a need for tech ethicists, and here's why, and to have so many people push back, because they don't understand it, push back because there was no such thing. So this is where sometimes I think students or kids can get caught up in a trap, because they might want to do something that they feel conviction around, but people push against it because they can't imagine that future, because that future doesn't exist today. But guess what? Sometimes we have to create the future of tomorrow, right? Sometimes we have to carve out a new path. So on my end, there was truthfully, there was no path, because it didn't exist, right? So on my end, I had to kind of fight, I guess, people who don't understand it or didn't understand it, and also my own kind of self-doubt. You're always going to have your own self-doubt and saying, maybe this isn't a real career. Maybe there isn't a real need for this. And I will say, how busy I am today, there's definitely a need for it. A lot of people reach out across the globe, uh, and that is all because I guess I stayed with my conviction. I believed in it, and I think that's where now I'm really excited to see this build up. Now there are programs to kind of train a tech ethicist. Now you see different kind of career paths opening up, and a lot of that is just because now people can see it. Now other people can watch this video and they can say, you know what, that's who I am. I have a multidisciplinary background. I care about the implication from a kind of ethical, legal, emotional perspective. I want to make sure that we have a better tech future. I'm interested in that, and then they can get involved. Again, you always need that. You always need to see that there's a possibility.
So tell us what you need to study to be a tech ethicist.
Yeah.
And are there programs that really are designed for people who really want to go specifically into this area?
Well, one of the things I was excited about, just very recently, I saw that I believe it's Pearson Education. They just started a certified ethical emerging technologist certification program, and that is showcasing kind of this multidisciplinary approach. And frankly, it's a broad mix, kind of what I was saying, a very transdisciplinary approach, where it's going to be, here's understanding a baseline of ethics, and kind of operationalizing that. Here's understanding artificial intelligence, how it's created, what it's doing. Here's how we can understand the overall business process if you are trying to kind of inject that in. I've also seen the rise of a lot of education programs on kind of the master's PhD program for this. You have a few kind of leaders in the space that are really trying to push this out. And what I will say, even if I think about my own background as an attorney, is professions that all of us know, like attorneys and doctors. It's always interesting if you go back and you read the history of those career paths or those professions before they were professionalized, because we forget that there were a time that lawyers didn't go to law school, because the first lawyers, right, there were no law schools. So the same thing for doctors. The idea is that as a career path grows, we start to professionalize it, and we start to create a structure around saying, okay, now we start to know what we need. Therefore, we're going to form what's going to make up that type of knowledge base. And from what I've seen in the space of kind of being a digital ethicist or tech ethicist, Right now, it's made up a- largely of a lot of people who have a strong kind of ethics background. There's a lot of people who are philosophy professors who are getting involved in this space, and there's frankly a lot of attorneys who are involved in the space. That's something that's also interesting because early on, I think a lot of people, when they thought of attorneys, they thought of their role in technology as being a compliance officer, and it's evolved because you have a lot of people who are saying, well, as an attorney, I'm constantly thinking of kind of the ethical implications, right? Attorneys have a lot of training and a lot of thinking around kind of the ethics of their profession. In addition, when you think about law, or you think about lawyers and attorneys that you talk to, they tend to be worst case scenario people. I bring this up because I think that's why a lot of attorneys are getting involved in the space, because a technologist or a founder of a company, they tend to think best case scenario, right?
Mhm.
They say, here's this product I'm creating, here's how everybody's going to use it, here's how it brings the world together and makes us smarter, right? Whereas an attorney is going to say, okay, here's how somebody could abuse this. Here's how it could be misused. Here's how it could go the wrong way. Here's how it could be used by an authoritarian country, right? So you actually need that. And I think that's why a lot of those folks, like myself, right, have become involved in the space, because it wasn't about being a naysayer. It was about being kind of pragmatic and realistic with saying, how can a technology go sideways? And therefore, if we understand its potential consequences, we can therefore limit or lower the amount of unintended consequences. Because if we look at a lot of the statements recently from well-known tech founders, they tend to say some variation of, well, I couldn't have foreseen this. But guess what? There are people every day across the world who are trying to predict this, who are trying to beat the drumbeat of saying, here's how this technology could be misused. Here's how it could be abused. That's important. And I think for too many years we were treating those voices on the sidelines. We were treating them as if they were detractors, as opposed
Absolutely.
to part of the process. And they
Absolutely.
really need to be part of the process.
Absolutely. And I think the congressional hearings with Facebook
Yes.
really, for me, were just so eye-opening. The first round, you had a lot of these members who did not even know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
Second time around, wow, AOC, the
Yeah.
questions. So you can see that things are moving and people are waking up about the ethical considerations. And that is really something that is, it's reassuring.
Yes, yeah, it certainly is. Well, and that also is one of the reasons why we need to get more people who are multidisciplinary. Because if you were leaving policy, right? If you didn't inject this technical understanding, then you wouldn't have the ability to offer the necessary oversight over these. And that's what you saw in that first hearing, where they infamously asked Mark Zuckerberg, right? How do you make money if you're free, right? So there was a limited understanding of this free but not free type of framework that most digital businesses utilized ever since the rise of Netscape, and then famously by Facebook and others, right? It is basically an ad platform, but because there wasn't that understanding, uh, we treated it as a way of saying policymakers over here and technologists over here. And then especially in the United States, where most of the consequential technology that's frankly having a very broad impact on the world at large comes from, uh, you had a kind of a treatment of saying, all right, we don't understand this, therefore we're going to allow you to just do what you're doing over in California. But that's not the way that it's supposed to work, right? That's not the way that needs to work. What you need to have is everybody play a certain role, right? So policymakers, they need to understand and the ability to create smart regulation, and also media. We should focus on media too. They
Yes.
have a very strong role to play because guess what? They educate, in a lot of respects, the general public about these issues. So what also happened is because a lot of these issues, because they seem so high tech, you would have media that maybe didn't scrutinize it a certain way because maybe they didn't fully understand it. So that's why there's been a big push and new platforms come about that are trying to say we want to have kind of training in this so then we can really interrogate the system. So the more they can understand it. So you're actually having a lot of technologists who are then, who maybe have a media background now being hired by these media companies who can now offer better oversight.
Interesting. It's interesting to me because at New Tech Kids, we're developing a course for primary school students to introduce them to ethical thinking frameworks when it comes to technology. So I think we see this as a real structural issue that every kid that goes through primary school should start learning about technology in the context of ethics.
Yes.
And yeah, it's and if I think if every kid could get this kind of education consistently through primary and high school, we will have a very, very different world. So
and that's where I got to say I am very optimistic of the future, because when I talk to college students today, or when I talk to high school or younger students today, they seem to get it a lot more than than just your average adult on the street. And I think that's also because they are growing up now in a time period where they're seeing the major ramifications that technology can have. But at the same time, still understanding, especially right now with the circumstances across the globe, where a lot of people are in lockdown, understanding that technology is not a luxury. It's oftentimes a lifeline. It's a requirement, right? A lot of education now is being done remotely. Therefore, we need to think about some of these larger issues like digital access, digital divide. We need to think about broadband access, right? This is important stuff, and I think that I'm very hopeful for the future, because it tends to be a lot more intuitive for the youngest generation.
absolutely. One last question for you, and that is, what concrete advice can you give to parents, teachers, and school guidance counselors in terms of really engaging kids around technology and ethics? Are there specific things that they can be doing to get this on kids, top of kids' minds, and for those who want to go into this field, to prepare them?
Yes. What I would say is that we need to make tech ethics concrete. So, for example, if you just say to somebody, especially a younger student, hey, what do you think about ethics in technology? You wouldn't get much of a reply because it seems very abstract. You're actually framing it in the abstract.
Right.
And also, ethics tends to have a connotation of navel gazing, or something like that. We tend to think of it as getting into these long, heated academic discussions, which is not going to seem very timely and something that we want to engage students with. Whereas if you frame it in a way of, for a student today, they might not get a young student, they might not get a driver's license. They might be in a self-driving car. How's that going to impact their life? You're going to have the ability to have virtual assistants make phone calls for you. How do you feel about that? All the assistants that you are interacting with. So, for example, if you said to a student right now, hey, are you interacting with Siri? Are you interacting with Alexa? They know who these characters are. They're humanizing these characters. But then there's tougher questions around why are most of the names female? How do we treat these virtual assistants? Should you have to say thank you to Alexa when you ask Alexa something? Should that be programmed into Amazon Alexa? If we don't say please and thank you, how is that interaction going to influence when we interact with somebody else? That's concrete, right? These are real life issues. So tech ethics can seem very abstract or obtuse, but at the end of the day, it's all around us. right? We're increasing, facial recognition technology, surveillance. We've got, nudging software that's being used in the workplace, right? Where interviews can be done that are reading my facial features to see if I'm smiling enough.
Mhm.
And that technology has major implications for whether it treats people differently based on ethnicity, skin color, based on how they do the testing data, right? These are real issues. These are big issues. These are important issues. So I think the more, as an educator, as a parent, the more we can bring it down to this is happening, this is real stuff, but also we don't want to be defeatist about it. Uh, we need you, right? Right? We need your thinking. We need your intelligence. We want the best minds of your generation to go into not giving me another app that gets me a pizza faster. I want to make sure I want to make sure that you're taking your intelligence and you're thinking, how can we make a better future? How can we make a more equitable future? How can we ensure that we we don't have a dystopian future, that we actually have a brighter one, because we know the potential, and the potential is there, but the potential is only met if people come together, if people argue about these issues, if people come up with smart policies, right? That's what we need to do.
Absolutely. I like that. And I think this is a wonderful end of the interview with you saying that we just have to have these discussions constantly when we see things happening, just constantly questioning kids. And I think that would be a great preparation. David, thank you so much for this great interview. I feel like I have a much stronger understanding of what a tech ethicist does, and I just hope to follow you because my son is crazy about TikTok. So the pressure's on you to make sure that
Good.
that this company is responsible. But thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Deborah.